Hi, so this is another quick catch up on our Sew for the Soul piece of work. I just thought I'd do a little mini one again, just to look at a couple of different techniques that you could start adding to your piece. I've added another section onto mine, and this month's challenge, or they should be month's challenges, but we're sort of doing them quite quickly, was looking at adding some bling and adding buttons. So I've started adding all sorts of shapes. So I've got some square ones. Quite a few of my Instagram posts, if you've seen those, have shown you sort of like these crustaceans of beads, where I've tried to get as many as possible, different shapes, patterns, and sort of built them up around. So that was built around my buttons, and then I'd done another section here that's built around my Suffolk puffs and buttons. When I started doing this, I put some of the big ones on first, and I really didn't like it, but I thought, no, you don't give up, you persevere and you keep going. So once I started actually adding other buttons in there and got these tiny variations, some of them are patterned, stitching them on in different ways, so from the holes going outwards with these tiny little ones here, and putting them inside my Suffolk puffs. When I did my demonstration last time, I showed you the ones where I'd actually stitched them around a piece of lace, and then here I'd got a line of French knots, so I've popped a little button, not a button, sorry, a little yellow bead just in and amongst. So this beginning bit of my piece here, I don't really think I've got any more room to add anything, but there's no reason to say that I won't go back and add it on. So I just keep going through it all and just looking for gaps and spaces where I could add more stitching, add some buttons or knots or beads, and just keeping going really. Adding some slightly different ones on there. I'd actually done these stitches beforehand, and I'd got these beads that were like long pointy things. They're for jewellery. So I tucked them inside the stitching and then fastened them on. So there's all different sorts of things. This was part of a picture that I posted yesterday on Instagram with my little hearts, little beads, because there was a little gap and I thought I'd add that there. So it just keeps on going and going and going. So there's a couple of things that I was going to mention that you might want to start doing, and I know I have seen a few people doing these things. So if you're doing it already, that's fine. The first thing is to couch things on top. So instead of doing stitching and putting fabric, you can lay things on and then trap them down with stitch. So here I've got a really fine piece of lace. I don't know if it's tiny tatting or it's tiny little stitch, and it has a tiny little little loop either side. It's really, really cute. So I've laid that down. So I want to start couching it onto the surface. So one of the simplest ways to couch is just to stitch over the top, but there are other things that you can do. One of the things I've started doing as well is in my button tin, my pin cushion, I have my threads on different needles so that I don't have to keep changing and swapping and starting. I've been using quite a few perlé threads at the moment. Just got some really, really nice colours. So one of the simplest ways just to couch is you just come up at one side, and it could be a piece of thread, lace, a ribbon, anything that you don't actually want to stitch through. So it's coming up one side and then going back down the other. So you're not actually stitching through it, you're just trapping it onto the surface. And so here I've got a grey background and it's a white piece of lace. So I'm using the yellow thread just to couch it down. So the simplest way to do it, like I say, is just a little stitch just over the top. But obviously one of the things that you can start doing, just hold that up there, see if you can see it. Like usual, what I'll do is I'll make sure that somewhere on my Instagram, because this is so tiny, that I've posted some pictures. If you're not on Instagram, if you really can't see it and you do want some images and you're not on Instagram or Facebook, if you drop me an email, I'll send you some photos just so that you've got a little bit of a close-up. So this is basically just up and down. You go up, over the top and down. But you could keep going like that, but then you can really start mixing it up. So one of the other things that you could do is use different stitches. So I could do my over, but do it diagonally, and then do another one going across the other side. So I'm using a cross stitch instead. And just by mixing your stitches up like this, it's just going to add a little bit more detail to your piece of work, a little bit more interest, a little bit more texture. So you could start with cross stitch over the top. So I've done 4 straight stitches, so I'll do 4 cross stitches. So at least I'm keeping in with a little bit of a pattern. I haven't stitched the fabric down that's behind it. I've just pinned it on because I know that stitching all these bits over the top is going to start stitching it down, and then I can decide afterwards, once I've added all my sections, if there is actually any stitching to do. I know some of you have been using tacking stitches to hold it all down, which is perfectly fine. I just tend to wing it as I'm going along. So I've got there my cross stitch, and a little straight stitch across. It's so tiny, I'm really not sure if you can see it that well. Don't know whether or not it's focusing. So like I say, I will put some pictures on. Mix it up a little bit, so little French knots, so you can add texture. So if you come up one side, normally with your French knot you would go back down, but don't go over the top. And what that will do is it will pop a little knot either on the top or to the side of your piece. So mine's going to the side. So if I come up the same side and then go back down, mind you, you could do it the other way around, so you get your knot on the other side. So pop it down the other side. So I'm not stitching through the piece of lace at all. I'm coming up at one side and then going back down the other. So French knots again, just a quick reminder, point your needle away from the hole, wrap it round a few times. The more times you wrap it round, the bigger the knot will be. I did do some, I'll show you in a second, on a little bit of lace, and I used embroidery cotton, just machine cotton, and it was lovely because it gave the tiniest knot and it was really delicate. So I've done 5, so I'll do another 5 of those. I've got this thing about not necessarily things being symmetrical, but I do like things in odd numbers. It's more aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so we've got on there then some tiny knots just there. So that's couching. Now you can, obviously you can couch anything down. It could be thread, it could be the pins. So when I put my little safety pins on, I couched those down because I was trapping it from one side to the other. So couching is quite nice. You can end up with little bits that end up meandering around it, but it's just nice because you're laying something on the surface of your piece. It's just going to add a little bit more texture. The French knots I was just mentioning, here it is, it's here. So it's this tiny piece, and I've just accentuated the lace just with the tiniest of little French knots, a couple of little lazy daisy stitches on there, just to add that little bit of detail, because it was just a blank piece that was white. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I wanted to keep it quite plain. So just adding the lace over the top, just cut a little piece out of piece of vintage lace I've got that got beautiful flower on these little leaves. I just thought that really does add something else. So that's the next thing, is the couching. The other bit then that I have taken a few pictures of and I had mentioned are the edges of your piece. Now it's going to be totally up to you what you want. I've seen some people's work that's beautifully neat and it's really crisp edges. I really like just playing with the fabric. Some of my edges are getting fluffier and fluffier, but I'd wondered about how could I do some stitches on the edges of my pieces. So I had to play around here with a blanket stitch and a bullion knot. So I've got a little section there, and then there's another little section just up here where I'd ended up with my smiley face and my buttons, a little bit there with these little bullion knots, and it just adds another edge. Okay, so thinking about edges, What you want to do before you do your bullion knots is give yourself an edge. So I've used buttonhole stitch just going down the edge of that piece. So I've prepared a little bit here with a buttonhole stitch just going down the edge, so it just gives me a thread to start attaching to. So to do my bullion knots, it is basically like doing a bullion knot. So we'll go with, might go with my darker grey. So obviously I'm now going to choose a colour that I wasn't ready with, because that's always the case. So put that one out of there. Okay, bullion knots. This is one of my favourite knots, but it is one of those ones when I haven't done them for a while, I just have to think about what I'm doing before I start. So I'll just get my needle threaded. Never wants to go in when you want it to. There we go. Okay, so bullion knots. Because we're not going to create it as a knot that's got a line like these ones here, we're just going back on ourselves. Okay, so I get my thread, just get it attached. Okay, so I'm going to start my first one here, just at the edge. So I bring my needle up, point it away from the hole. I think about this now. Away from the hole. Wrap it round itself quite a few times. No, not doing it right. I knew I'd do it wrong. I have to go back in. That's it. Put your needle through, because it's got to go back through. Okay, the way I was doing it was a French knot, so a bullion knot has to go through your fabric. Wrap it round. You want it wrapped around quite a few times to create your little loop. So I've probably gone about halfway length of my needle. What you want to do then is just tease that needle through. Just hold those threads. Give it a little bit of a wiggle. It just depends on the size of the eye of your needle as to how easily that comes through. Then pull your thread through nice and slowly. Nice and slowly. Okay, so that you've got it there. And then you're going to go back through the bottom. And what that does is it brings it back around on itself. So then I've created a little loop. Okay, so decide where you want your next one. Come through your fabric, bring your needle through. Okay, so I've got my needle through. Get your needle, go back down the hole that you've just made. So I'm going back down the hole, wrap it quite a few times. Obviously, the thicker your thread, I probably wouldn't do this with anything smaller than a perlé thread. It's just going to be too hard. So I'm just teasing my needle through. It's a bit hard to see this. Try and make it as visible as possible. So I'm just teasing those threads off my needle. Come on, off you come. I always find it helps to talk to your sewing stuff. I always talk to my sewing machine. So pull it through nice and slowly until you've got it so it's about the same. Okay, then your needle goes back through the bottom, not through your finger, back through the bottom. Again, just pull it slowly and you create your little loop. So it's come through your fabric, back through. So what I'm doing here is I've got my thread here and my needle's gone back through the fabric. Get my thread like you would do with a bullion knot, wrap it around. The more you wrap it round, the loopier your knots will be. Once you've got to a length that you're happy with, again, just pull that needle. There There we go. Pull that thread through. Just need to get that little tail end through. That's it. So pull my thread, then go back through the bottom of your stitch, and you are creating then these really lovely little loops down the edge, which can end up looking really, really, really cute. So I've got a section of little loops there that I did. I did my blanket stitch and then left a gap, and did a blanket stitch and left a gap. So it just then gave me just a little bit of breathing space, I suppose, between each of them. Another one that you can do to add into this, to use a blanket stitch, is to create a little like a bridge. So here I've got some little bridges, like little loops that come off. I know some people can do tatting and things like that, so I don't know if this equates to some form of tatting. Don't really know, but that is just done with a little loop, and then you do a blanket stitch around the loop of the thread. I haven't got a section. I could probably do one here. Put one in. Might as well put one in. So what you want to do with this one is you create yourself a loop of thread. So that's going to be the little loop. You can see there, left a little loop of thread, and then what? Oops! Then what you're going to do? The first couple ones are just a little bit tricky just to get going. What you're going to do then is your blanket stitch. You just do the first one and just anchor it. So I've got my thread there. So I'm going underneath and over. And it is a little bit fiddly, but you just keep going. So underneath the loop, over my thread. Oops. Okay, and then just gently just pull that little knot just towards the little bit that you've just done. Okay, so underneath the loop, over my thread. And then just pull it, and you start creating a little line of knots under and over. So underneath, over the top. And again, if you're right-handed, I'm really sorry. If you're left-handed, it's excellent. I know there are quite a few lefties out there because I've had some really nice messages from people. Can I just add as well, thank you so much to all the really nice messages that everybody's been sending, to say that this was a project that I was doing at the start of this year just to keep me, I don't know if the word sane is the correct terminology, but really it's because I'm so busy, because I'm still teaching. Well, I'm not, obviously not as much at the moment, which is why I'm able to do quite a lot more videos, but I still teach 4 days a week. I've got 2 children, husband, and doing all this, and it was just nice to start doing something that was just for me without having to make something. I know a few people have asked what we're going to make. They've asked other people, what are you going to make with it? It's up to you. I hadn't got a plan for what I was going to make at all. I just put it on a bobbin and I just set off sewing. There wasn't really a master plan with anything, and it's just going to be on a bobbin. I don't really want to have it just wrapped up on a bobbin, because once I've done it all, I don't really want to put it away. But I've just, while we've been off, I've been redecorating my bedroom, and well, surprisingly it's got grey and yellow in it, with a bit of blue. So I would imagine it's going to go somewhere in our bedroom. So just adding these last little bits on. So you just keep going. So it's always underneath your thread, over the top of your other thread. So it's through the loop, and over the top. And you just keep going, just creating a little line of knots. all the way, right the way to the end, and then you'll just finish it off. There you go, that's the last one. Just finish it off just with a little stitch through, just to hold it in place. So I'm just looking for a dark bit of fabric. There we go. Put that underneath. No, don't want a dark one. I need a light piece of fabric. There we go, a lighter piece of fabric. So you can see, hopefully, these two different types of edging. So you've got the bullion knot, which gives you these really, really cute little knots just on the edge. And then the one that I've just shown you gives you this lovely little archway, just with a little knot around the edge. It just gives a really nice finish. Not everywhere, but if you've just got some fabrics that you can just do a blanket stitch down just to give you an edge to then start stitching into. Obviously there's loads of different things that you can do as well, but these are just two that I've really, really enjoyed doing so far. I've taught myself 2 new techniques, which is always really nice to do when you're doing something like this, so you're not just sticking to everything that you are used to doing. So it is a really, really nice way to work. If I get a chance, I might try and do a couple of little videos of these that are a little bit closer up so that you can see them a little bit like I did my bullion knots on Instagram, just so that you can just have a go at doing something like that. So those are the next couple of bits that I'm doing. I'm still adding on little bits of fabric. I got a lovely stripy fabric the other day from the village haberdashery. So I did a little more traditional borrow shishiko stitching, doing the grid work, and it's just really created this sort of waffle technique. I think with having the cotton wadding on the back, it's sort of quilted, which is really, really nice. Again, mixed in some more of my Suffolk puffs. I can't resist those. And I've also started adding some more of my hexagons, or hexes, as everybody started calling them. So I've got a couple of bits that I want to add in there as well. So it's really, it's carrying on. I've been really, really impressed with all the work that I've been seeing, and thank you so much for continuing to send me pictures and tag me in with what you've been doing. So that's where I'm up to this week. I have got a couple more things that I'm going to carry on working on this. I've actually been working, so I don't think I'm probably going to go longer than the end. I want to just, because I think if I keep going, it's never going to stop. And I have got plans at the moment for a second project this year, because this one was meant to take the whole of the year, and each of the things that we've been doing, I was just going to do each month. So really we're actually in June, July nearly now with the tasks. I'm going to take this to the end of my piece with all the different techniques, but I have got another project coming hopefully later on this summer. I'm just waiting for some bits and pieces to arrive, because obviously the post is taking quite a long time at this moment to arrive, and I'm excited. I've got lots of plans for the next project, which is still going to be hand stitching, and it's still going to be about mindfulness and just stitching for the love of stitching, but it won't be on a bobbin like this. I'm not going to give too much away because I've not totally finalised everything in my head, but I have definitely got a second project. I know a few people have asked me what's going to come next, so I have got some ideas of different sorts of things. So that's it for now. Just a really quick update. So the next 2 things to start thinking about once you've finished blinging up your piece is couching, so laying things down and stitching over the top, and considering your edges. And then I'll have another video coming up shortly with the next part of the project. Okay, thanks ever so much for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and sending everybody a virtual hug. Bye bye.